The award-winning A Black Executive Perspective podcast presents A Mixed Executive Perspective. Hosted by Grace Fooden-Correy, a biracial executive with a distinct voice on leadership and belonging. A Mixed Executive Perspective.
Hi, I'm Grace Fooden-Correy, and welcome to the first episode of A Mixed Executive Perspective. This podcast is about being mixed American in corporate culture and how mixed people are read and interpreted and positioned at work in broader culture. This conversation isn't limited to Black and white. It's for mixed people across race, ethnicity, nationality, and culture, and for parents raising mixed children who are already navigating these questions, whether they have language for them or not. Mixed race people make up about 2% of the workforce, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. That number, however, is misleading. Most workplace surveys still use single race categories, meaning that many of us are asked to choose one story about ourselves over another. I've been asked to do this my entire career. And sometimes, even when the instructions say check one, I check both. Not because the system allowed it, but because it's who I am. So why start this conversation now? Because population data shows substantial growth in the mixed population, especially among younger generations. Mixed identity is no longer marginal, but the structures we work inside haven't caught up. Before I understood race or corporate culture, I understood systems. I grew up in a mix of systems that weren't supposed to coexist. Cooperative systems at home and competitive individual systems at school. That contradiction shaped how I learned to belong and how I learned to succeed and how I learned not to be a problem. This episode is about that early training and how it shows up later in corporate life. So now I'm going off script and I'm going to talk a little bit about how I am a mix of mixes. I grew up in a housing cooperative that my white Jewish father and my dark-skinned Black mother helped to create back in 1950. And they got together with a group of other mixed couples and decided they were going to create a new reference point for what it was to be mixed in this part of the south side of Chicago near the University of Chicago campus. So we grew up living in a place where there were lots of mixed families and a real sympathy towards mixed families, but that certainly wasn't the norm outside of our housing co-op. We went to private school where there was an entirely different system. This was much more driven by class and intelligence and competitiveness. And it was really diametrically opposed to what we were growing up with at home. In addition to the housing co-op at home, we also were part of a food co-op and a furniture co-op, and we went to a cooperative camp in the summer. So you can see these were really drastically different parts of ourselves. And what it taught me was that there were different systems operating in the world and that I was operating in two very different systems. And sometimes I very successfully, behaved one way one place and behaved another way another place. But by the time I got to high school, I was wearing designer clothes on a hike at the camp. Things didn't always line up as I tried to figure out who I was. That didn't mean I rejected either system. What it really taught me is that I could internalize both. And so my life is a combination of all of these systems, being Black, being white, even having this, Jewish element through my father that never came up within our family, but did in the broader world. and being part of a cooperative system where we really learned to work together, and it was all about community versus this very individualistic system of being at school. So at private school, I had all white friends, and I sat at the white lunch table. And there was a black lunch table at this private school, wealthy black kids or parents who scraped to send their children to this special school. But the difference between them and me, and why I didn't sit at the black lunch table, is because they all had a code to switch to. They all had a different way they were in their social time and with their families. I did not have that. I only had one code, and that code was really bred in white culture. So I sat with the white kids at the white lunch table with my white group of girlfriends, and that seemed completely normal to me at the time. By the time I was a junior in high school, I decided I really needed to figure out this black thing. Now we're starting to date, and now people are asking me out who are black, but I don't really know how to talk to them. I can tell you about living in a cooperative and helping the community, but that wasn't going to fly. So I went to the black school with the attempt to trying to fit in and learn about being in black culture. This was a major fail, because when I got there, I was put in all of the honors classes because of the school I came from. And as the world sorts people out, all of the honors kids were again white. So, I tried. And it really made me think about who decides where you belong. Even when I tried to belong, I still couldn't. And that was so part of our culture. So in corporate visibility, I also didn't belong. So in my corporate life, I also didn't belong. At Victoria's Secret, it was an executive role in design. In my corporate role, I also didn't belong. I was at Victoria's Secret, and I was a executive designer, the only black one. Nothing new for me. But I was invited to go on a private jet with 7 other black executives from the company to a black tie dinner in Washington, D.C. And we flew there after work, and we had dinner. We had made small talk and went home. I never saw those people again, and I wondered why that was. And I think there are a couple reasons. One reason was because I think they just scraped us all together to make a showing at this dinner. The other reason is more personal. I didn't fit in with the other black people in that group because, again, I didn't have that other code to switch to. I didn't know how to just be social in black culture, except for the way that I had always been with everyone. So I probably sounded pretty white. So access isn't really the same as inclusion. So while I had access to black culture at the public school and in places like this dinner, I still didn't fit in. And I kind of just went on with my life anyway, not really looking at it, just noticing that this was happening. Another thing that this difference taught me was to not make myself a problem in situations at school or at work. I learned early not to be the problem. I already stood out enough. I knew it, even at a young age. This still opens doors today. People say to me sometimes in work situations or social situations in a coded, very gently coded way that you aren't like the others, that you don't seem to have problems, those types of words. And what is really being told to me is that I don't sound black. And I usually brush it off. I'll be honest. I'll say no, I don't have problems. I don't really go deep and address it because the truth be told is they don't really want to talk about it. They just want to acknowledge me as this thing. And it shows the awkwardness of the conversations that we're having or not having, both personally and at work, and how coded this whole way of being has become. So I had just been promoted to a senior vice president at a company and moved to Los Angeles for the role. And a C-suite executive from the New York office came to the office and made a point of introducing himself to me. And he said to me, "You don't have any problems, do you?" That same phrase. And I said, "No, I don't. Everything's fine." And he said this in a way that was not meant to be a compliment. It was a coded way of talking about my identity as performance. So it happened in all levels of my life all the time. It still happens today. I didn't have problems because I learned early on not to be one. And I've now given up that facade, and I'm willing to talk about what it really feels like and what are the things that I see that others don't. I think it's time. That moment, as I said, wasn't unusual. It was just unusually clear. Being mixed in corporate America often means being rewarded for not disrupting the room, for being understandable, familiar, safe. These rewards are real, and so are the trade-offs. This podcast is about the space I didn't have early in my career, a place I can talk honestly about what it costs to fit in and what I got from it, and what happens when you stop pretending those trade-offs don't exist. In future episodes, we'll look at how mixed identity is read at work, how power responds to ambiguity, and why so many mixed professionals become translators. If this conversation resonates with you, I welcome your feedback, and you can support by showing, you can support this show by subscribing, sharing, and continuing the conversation. Thank you.
A Black Executive Perspective.